All right, welcome to another episode of Kansas City Legends by KC Caffeine. I am your host, Jaybee, and today I have a very, very special guest. I have the Godfather, the the master, the dopest dude I know. Okie, how are you doing?
I'm pretty good. Thank you for that awesome introduction. I hope I can live up to all of those things.
Well, it's you are one of those people that like when I first got in the community, um, everyone was like, "You got to meet Oki. You got to meet Oki. You got to meet Oki," and you did not disappoint. Um, it's so cool to like meet somebody who's like when you walk into a room, your presence is felt. You know what I mean? And you are not a big imposing dude, but your energy is so like I am here, and it's humble. It's not even like I'm the man. It's just like you're gonna respect me because I exist, and I love that about you.
Well, thank you. I I think it's because I like to interact with people on the same way that I'd like to be treated. And I also know that when I first got into this, and as anybody probably knows, when they first get into this, it's kind of tough, and you're probably not going to be treated the way that you thought you would, because you're new, you don't know the language, and so people kind of, you know, shy away from you a bit because of those things. So yeah, I hope that it's helpful for some of the people who I meet because I feel I kind of empathize with their experiences, especially when they're new.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I felt you were one of those people that when I came in, I felt immediately welcome, and like I belong. Like it almost was like we didn't go through that period where you don't know someone and you're just getting to know them and things are awkward. It was like, oh, this is Oki. Okay, cool. Oh, that's JB. Oh, okay, cool. And we just kind of went from there. And I think that's one of those things that I think makes people really get to respect you and get to know you and who you are and want to know more about you, which is one of the things reasons why I wanted to do this interview. And I know that you've done a million interviews before. You've talked about a lot of things, and I'm sure we'll go over some of that stuff as well. But you know, for those who don't, I want to get into like new shit and different stuff. But for those who don't know who Oki is, maybe the one person who's been living under a rock or somebody who maybe hasn't ever been to a kink event in the city or the country or the world and doesn't know who you are, why don't you just give them a little brief introduction so we can get all that out of the way?
Okay, well, I've been doing this for 25 years, actually over 25 years now. Um, I was the first heterosexual to compete, and actually, let me go back. I was the first heterosexual in Oklahoma to win a leather title. Ironically, I was also the first person of color, but that wasn't a big deal. The big deal was my sexual orientation. And then I became the first heterosexual to compete at International Mr. Leather. Uh, if that wasn't enough, I decided to become what they call a sash hole. Uh, and I won another leather title in 2004, Great Plains Olympus. And actually, that was in 2005. 2006, I won International Mr. Olympus. I was also a board member of the National Coalition for Sexual Freedom. I was the first person of color to be on the board of the NCSF. And I won a Pantheon Award, which is kind of like the leather Oscars. And I've been to Japan to study Japanese rope bondage and have been going since 2009. And I've been presenting for over 20 years. And the last thing Oh gosh, there's just so much. And then the last thing though, I have currently been um teaching Japanese style rope bondage, and I've also been listed recently on a website for people who practice Japanese rope bondage, primarily in Japan, called Nowapedia. It's kind of an honor to be on that website.
That's so dope.
Yeah, that just happened, well, a year ago. That was like, I was just like in shock. I was going, "Oh my god." That was pretty cool. And
Well,
other stuff.
that's
Yeah.
so. I kind of want to start with the titles. Um, Part of it is, you just briefly mentioned that you were the first heterosexual and also the first person of color. But they didn't. The first person of color wasn't the big deal. It was the heterosexual portion of that. What was that like, being like the quote the straight guy, in the middle of these these very gay, very you know
Yeah,
gay
I kind of
kinky
get
events?
I kind of get where you're coming from. So first of all, I came from the kink community,
Right.
and there was a request that some of us try to compete for Oklahoma Mr. Leather. And so I was the one who actually said yes. And so all of the leather people were going, "Oh, that's cute, little straight boy. You're gonna compete in the Big Leather Man contest." And I fucking won. And so here's literally what happened. So news doesn't travel as fast as it does today, right? So something happens, somebody tweets it, you get on your social networking site. It's pretty much all over the place in a matter of seconds. So I won, and the most popular leather rags, Bay Area Reporter, Leather Page, the Leather Journal, the news people just went there and said, this heterosexual guy won. And it was kind of a big deal, and people couldn't believe it. So let's go on and unpack that, because what actually happened was the judges took a chance on me. All five of the judges, who are iconic leather people, decided out of five other people that I would win. Now, okay, you're part of the Kansas City Pioneers, right?
Yes.
So the first time I went to the meet and greet for the contest, let me tell you what I wore. I wore a velvet shirt, and I wore these platform loafers with zebra skin on top and some chains outlining the side. And I wore these super baggy club pants. I was ready just to party. And so I walked in, and everybody looked at me and was like, "Oh, Jesus, look what the cat drug in."
Right.
And there was no way that, they saw me and they're like, "Oh, poor straight boy." Uh, well, a friend of mine now, at that time, he was international drummer. He took me aside and he said, "Honey, you need to change." And he said, "We don't wear velvet. We definitely don't wear platform shoes, and we don't wear baggy pants." And I already knew this. I actually did my research for years. I had all of my stuff ready to go for the contest starting the following morning when I was going to wear stuff. But I did make the biggest mistake. Fast forward to 24 hours later, I was being sashed as the winner. It was a pretty big deal.
And I think
And mhm.
that if you like, you knew going in that what you were wearing at that time was not going to fly, but but you did it and you got noticed. People were noticing you, and they were like, so you weren't just, oh, this straight dude that came in. You came in and made an impact. You came in and made a statement. It may not have been the statement that they thought it would have made, but it got you noticed.
You know what? That's a good point. I didn't think about it that way. It really did. But I'm not sure how much, you know, I'm not sure about the type of attention that I actually uh wanted, because uh the current international Mr. Leather didn't want to talk to me. He actively avoided me. My current leather daddy and my mentor, one of my mentors, Mark Frazier, he wasn't going to talk to me. And also the current international, well, the international Mr. Leather that was homegrown in Oklahoma, IML 95, Larry Everett, he was avoiding me like the plague too. So everybody was just looking at me like I was just some type of social pariah at that time. It wasn't until the following morning when I hit interviews that they saw that I was knowledgeable and prepared, and I was able to explain why I wore what I wore. Um, but then put it into context of what is acceptable clothing to wear in a leather bar.
Yeah. I mean, it
So,
definitely turns. It's I think it's the idea of, and as a person of color, you and I, I think we both kind of understand the term code switching, and
oh yeah,
and
oh
how
yeah,
to, that you have to be certain things in certain spaces, and if you're
right,
not those things, then people look at you differently, or people
right,
expect something different of you. And so you walked into, in my mind, and I'm not, obviously this wasn't intentional, but you came in not switching codes. Like, you came into that building going, this is what I wanted to do today, so I'm going to do it. And then you were
right,
able to show them, oh, I can still do what you do.
right.
You know,
That's yeah, that's a good point. And then during the interview, you have to think about that. I could have pretty much gave them formulated answers, but as far as code switching is concerned, you have to go beyond what, let's go on and call it the norm, as far as people who are non-POC are concerned, white
mhm.
people.
We
Uh,
yeah,
you can't be well spoken, right? And I'm saying that knowing everything that I knowing everything that it actually implies, because if you go in there as a person of color and you're going to do the standard stuff and code switch in such a way, then you're not going to be your authentic self.
yep,
So if I were to just say the things, then I don't think I would have been able to bring, like you said, my authentic self to the table. And this is something that often gets overlooked, because if you are not going to do that, you're not going to be your own person. And how are you going to represent yourself to other POC communities as somebody who is in this particular position? Does that make sense?
it does. It makes sense a lot. I think about that a lot. Being in the pioneers, and being the only person of color, black identified person of color in the pioneers,
Mm-hmm.
and it actually leads me to my next question for you. One of the things that that I've heard a lot from non POC members, is, they'll have people who are black, or black identified, or people of color. They're like, well, we didn't we didn't see ourselves in the group, so we didn't think to join.
Right,
And I looked at it with, I don't see anybody in there, so that's absolutely my place to join, so that other
right.
people can be seen. Now, when you say you were the first POC to win, International Mr. Leather, right?
No, no, I
No,
won Oklahoma Mr.
Oklahoma
Leather.
Leather. The
Yeah.
did you see others? Sorry, I'm looking at the notes and my handwriting is terrible, guys. Did you happen to see more people of color come up after you that maybe they saw what you did and went, okay, now
Uh-huh.
now there's a space for me.
Right. Uh, no,
No, sure didn't.
you got to remember that this was over 20 years ago. So, as a matter of fact, I saw one other for the first time since I had been in the lifestyle. So it was like a year and a half. I finally found another Leatherman, Danny. He's passed on since, rest his soul. And I was like, yes, there's somebody who looks like me, and I was really happy. So that was the first time I saw somebody uh, that was also BIPOC, right? Black,
Right.
Indigenous, person of color. I hadn't seen anybody else,
Well, and
and I
it's
didn't. Yeah, sorry.
no. I was gonna say what's so interesting is I know that with the feelings that I feel when I see another black identified person of color come into a dungeon or come into a king space, I get super excited, you know,
Right.
because it's like that. There's someone here that looks like me that has some of the similar experiences and all of that. And I can only imagine as, you essentially infiltrated the gay world. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
you went in and so you found all of the you came in and you brought a different energy into that space. So I can only imagine, and being both heterosexual and black, that it being difficult, maybe in the beginning for to kind of get your footing and find people who, because we'd like to think that like gay, that the gay world is this wonderful bastion of love, light, and togetherness, and it's
Mhm.
really not. It's
No,
just like any
it's not.
other community where
Just
you
like
have
yes,
real problems with bigotry and
yes,
racism and sexism and all of that. And so,
yes, yes.
did you have any of
I
those
agree.
kind of experiences?
Oh, a lot. First of all, um, there was a lot, especially in Oklahoma. And I think the biggest one example that I can think of was there was this one guy, we were sitting around, we were watching TV. He was part of the leather club that I had joined called Tulsa Uniform Leather Seekers Association. And we were watching the Golden Girls. And he said, you are not like those other ones. And I was like, what do you mean? And he said, well, you're so well spoken. That's going to come up a few times, by the way. Uh, and I said, what are you talking about? Well, you don't talk like those N words. And I'm not sure if I can say that on your
You can
show.
say it.
Oh, okay. He said, you don't sound like a nigger. And so I just kind of held my cool, right? And I said, well, this is the way my mom taught me to talk. Now, I could have went off and said everything and, cussed him out and had been morally right. But at this point, we talked it out, and he said, and I said, this is pretty much what my mom valued as far as pronunciation is concerned. Doesn't have anything to do with me overcoming my environment or anything like that. This is just who I am and how I communicate. And even if I did, which I do, depending where I am, and that's where we talk about code switching, then I'm also going to communicate the ideas in order to get across with the people with whom I feel comfortable. And we all do that.
Yes.
And then he said, well, you see, I'm watching the Golden Girls, and I bet you think I'm some sort of, and I'm gonna go on and just be pretty blunt. You think I'm just some kind of cutesy, um, Twinkie kind of fairy guy, and I'm
A
like, dude,
faggot. Is that what you was gonna say?
yeah, no, 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 I wasn't gonna say that because he didn't use that.
Okay.
He and now, mind you, this guy, I mean, is the toughest guy I know, right? He's the reddest redneck. As a matter of fact, he scored higher on straight acting.com than I did. He achieved a level 2, and I'm somewhere around a level 4. And just to unpack that, straightacting.com is just a quiz that people can take to see how straight you act. And the lower score you get, the more heterosexual you are identified. And he pretty much got one of the lowest scores you can get. Me, on the other hand, I didn't. And I mean, he was tough. And I said, no, you're one of the toughest guys that I know. And at that particular point, we found that, you know, external perceptions about how people treated us and perceived us in our respective areas were pretty strong. And at that's where we pretty much found a way to relate to each other. It was a teachable moment, and we became good friends. And he pretty much was an influential person in my life, and we were at times mentors to one another. So it was a good exchange. It was rough at the beginning, but
I will
it
tell
was
you because
very
you better than
worthwhile.
me.
Oh, dude. I mean, I could have went there,
the
but I don't see. I mean, the only thing that would have happened was we would have just had this animosity. And here's the thing: we were part of the same leather club.
so you had to work it out.
We did, and also it in the long run it helped, because I think that those things that he saw, or those experiences that we had with each other through discussions, really helped him become a very good leader in the leather community. And that was something that I was proud of, that friendship. He's passed on since too, but
I think that
he was a great
it's
guy.
I think that when you talk about that specific instance, it kind of brings to mind a lot of times where um we do as with code switching, and we have to like be this specific person because like you said, I am the same way where depending on who I'm talking to, you're going to get a different, you know maybe different vernacular is going to come out, maybe different, and really it comes with comfort. The more comfortable
Right,
I am with you, the more I let down some of those walls. And
right, right.
so I think were there ever any times in that era where you felt uncomfortable in your skin in the environment that you were in? Were there times when, you know,
Hmm.
your blackness or your, straight your straightness kind of caused
Hmm.
you problems, in the actual, not necessarily within your leather family, but like in this on the
Uh-huh.
circuit.
Here's the irony: it was more my blackness. I was able to reconcile my straightness. However, there were certain things that I had to realize. I was a heterosexual identified male coming into a gay male culture, hyper masculine. And here I am, like I said, I'm like 5 foot nothing, weigh like a buck 30. And I identify as a dominant male, right? And so going into this hyper masculine male energy, and me trying to pull something that would be cute and manipulative, or something that would work in a pansexual, read heterosexual male, bisexual women type of environment, then I'm going to be seen differently. There, instead of being, oh, this cute manipulative dominant in a pansexual community 20 years ago, it was, oh, look, you're this cute little boy.
Yep.
Oh, I don't care if you wear stuff on the left side. You're cute. I'm gonna take you home, and you're just gonna be my love slave, and everything like that. and I'm using some euphemisms there because, oh my God,
Oh,
the
you was gonna be
things
somebody
that
bottom.
some hot,
That's they
oh
thought you
yeah,
was gonna be
big
somebody
time,
bottom.
big time. And so I actually had to learn a culture in order to interact appropriately so that I would be able to project the type of image and energy that I wanted to actually represent and be seen as. And that was tough. I went through boot camp. And to tell you the truth, I deserved every second of that, even though I knew the history and I could tell you all of the things that were important in the leather community. Being able to behave in that manner and also have the respect of the men that I was interacting with was the biggest challenge. I wasn't taken seriously, and rightfully so. And so that year was tough. It wasn't really great in that way. Even though I was comfortable with myself and who I was, I also had to make sure that I needed to, I don't want to say portray, but I also wanted to project a certain energy on how I identified with on the inside.
And I think it's
And
really
mhm,
interesting because it turns this idea to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, please. But to me, it kind of turns that idea of, when we talk about women being in like dungeon spaces and things where they are
mhm,
looked at kind of as, in a lot of ways, some of them feel like the prey or like the piece of
mhm,
meat. You kind of had
right.
that experience, where you
Oh
were looked
yeah.
at as the prey or the piece of meat, or you know something, someone that needed to be, things could have gone very poorly. You know what I mean? Like the wrong person with the wrong intentions could have gone poorly for you. And not to say that couldn't protect yourself in those situations, but it could have gone bad. You know what I mean? And so it really is one of those things that makes you
Mhm,
think about
mhm,
when you're the other in a room.
right. So here's the catch 22. If I protected myself the way that people usually protect themselves, then that just shows that, oh, there's another head guy thinking he needs to be physical and all of that stuff. And each time I had to remember that I am representing a community that wants to be a part of the leather community. And so just like with that other instance with the leather man who's a redneck, and he's proudly a redneck, but and we were able to resolve our differences and become good friends. I had to think that way all of the time. I couldn't just go, yeah, I just couldn't just say, hey, you need to stop, get away from me, and all that. I kind of had to, I I would say, finesse my way into creating positive experiences, or I would say mutually agreed upon, or and at best beneficial experiences. So when those things happen, and I think the one at IML after I had finished competing, there was this guy next to me, and he hugged me, and luckily I was wearing a daddy harness. And a daddy harness is a harness that you would wear that has a bottom strap that connects to your cock ring, and then the other strap connects through your backside to the back part of the harness, so it protects your asshole, right? So I was wearing that in my little tight leather jock strap, and this guy's hugging me, and he's like, "Tonight we're gonna party." He slips his hand down my my jock strap, and he tries to finger my asshole, and he couldn't.
You're like,
And I'm
ah,
like, dude,
protection, bitch.
yeah, I was protected. I'm like, dude, yes, we are going to party, but I'm going to go on and find my wife, and we're going to go on and 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 party, or we're actually going to go to party and then go to sleep because it's been a long weekend.
Right. You can do what you
So,
want to do. I just won't be there.
right, you do you, boo. And so, he was like, oh, okay. So, it worked out. Luckily, I did have on gear that
you know,
allowed me not to
that
get
protected your booty
penetrated.
hole.
Yeah.
You have to protect the booty
and
hole.
it, yeah, without my consent.
Yes. So you also had your sash wife was trans and was the first trans. You said the first trans woman to be
International
to
Miss
be
Olympus.
yes. So tell me a little bit
Yeah,
about
that
that.
was 6 years later. So that was another leather contest. So this was at International Miss Olympus, and Lady Raven became the first international title holder who was a trans woman. And so that was a pretty big deal. And what happened was the regionals, she did not win. And one of the reasons why was because she was a trans woman competing for a Miss title. And so people really didn't know how that would fly at the international level. There was this other guy there, and he's pretty amazing, who took her under his wing and mentored her for several months. And so she competed at the international level on her own. And she competed against the person she had lost to in the regional preliminaries, right? And I saw them and I'm like, I'm hanging around with them. She looked awesome. And he is like this amazing person. And so basically, he became both of our handlers throughout the entire weekend. And at the end of the contest, when they tallied everything up, we won. Not only did she make history as the first trans woman to win an international Miss title, but we became the first Black couple to win an international title.
Oh wow.
And what did that get us? That got us into the Leather Archives and Museum. It's in the trans wing right now, so I believe it's downstairs. And you go down the stairs, and I think it's one of the first things that you'll see. It's more her, but then there was this caption that talked about, well, there were things where you were able to where people were breaking boundaries even back then, which is 15 years ago. And so you'll see us in there. And it was a pretty big deal.
That's
But she
actually that's amazing to and to think when you think about the fact that even 15 years ago there were still barriers for people of color to to
mhm,
to be the first of, like, the fact that even in 2000, now in 2021, there are still things that we have. There are people that can be the first black XYZ, and
mhm.
we think about, like, oh, slavery was so long ago and Jim Crow was so long ago, blah 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 blah. It's really not. And
It's yeah, yeah,
you
you're
know
right.
when you think about, like, 15 years ago, I think 15 years ago I was an adult. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not gonna say how old I was, but I was an adult. I was still an adult. And so this idea that, like, the first black couple, the first trans, I can kind of get and understand, but the idea that
Right,
there's the first, you know, black couple in leather, when you think about leather was is yes, leather is primarily a was at the time primarily an LGBT thing, and
right.
had to be boundaries had to be given. But there have been black gay people forever. You know what I mean? Like, and
Mm-hmm.
and there have been black leather people forever.
Mm-hmm.
And so this idea that
Mm-hmm.
that's just then, not that long ago, and you are a piece of history. Not only are you a piece of leather history, you're a piece of LGBT history and a piece of black history.
So here's the thing. Kane Berlinger wrote Black Men in Leather back in 1998. And I could be by a year or two. And he talks about the black experience and the leather community. The challenge with that book is he talks about the black male experience, doesn't talk about the black female experience. Now, I recently had the opportunity to talk to him and got myself in some trouble, good trouble. And I said, well, what about the black female experience? What about the queer movement that's been going on? What about the gender non-conforming communities that have been rapidly growing? I think, especially of color. What about these experiences that have now uh, become have come to the forefront? And then he said, "Well, why don't you write something?" And I'm like, "Okay." And so I owe him a book chapter, which which I hope to finish during December because I'll have a few weeks to of free time to do that. But when you talk about the black experience and the problems and the good things about being the first of something, why should we have to recognize that? Because we should, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, why should we have this? And it's good in a way that you're recognizing this, but it's bad that you have to do it. It's kind of bittersweet, if that makes sense.
Yes.
It's like, yay, yay.
I think that
Uh, mhm.
for me, I think that it's sweet that it's being recognized, but the fact that it's the fact that it means a door has been opened that was previously closed is what is
Mhm.
not is the sad part for me.
Yeah, here's one that's well, it's pretty sad, but it has an amazing outcome. Going back to when I won Oklahoma Mr. Leather, a friend of mine heard about it, and he is a black man who's been a leatherman for a long time, since the 70s. He competed in the same contest that I won 6 years prior. And he's been an experienced leather maker, leather daddy, had brought a lot of people along, and he didn't win. He competed probably several times. And so when he saw that I won, it gave him a little hope that there is a possibility for diversity. 2 years after that, I had the opportunity to produce a contest called Oklahoma Drummer. And I don't know if you know anything about the drummer contests.
I don't.
So there's International Mr. Leather,
Hmm?
and then there's Drummer. Drummer was a contest that was driven by sex and raunchiness about leather. That's sexual freedom, right?
Right.
And the winners of the drummer contest, especially if they won the international contest, were that they were able to be featured in Drummer magazine as the centerfold. So Drummer has since been replaced by Leather Sir, and Leather Sir is trying to keep that drummer spirit along as the contest for the bad boys or the people who are players, but also educators. So I had the opportunity as a heterosexual man to produce a contest for gay men. And this person competed and won. So first it kind of looked like, well, you as a black man were, you were one of the producers. You probably influenced that. He went to the next level of competition, the regional competition, and won. And he competed at the international level as a result. Therefore, just dispelling any type of myth that there was any type of, let's say, politics or nepotism or whatever you'd like to call it.
Right.
He won on his own merits. And as a person of color, he became the first person of color to win the drummer contest in Oklahoma. And I believe he was also the first person of color to win the regional contest as well.
That's so. I mean, I look at that and I just think we've always been here. We've always
Mm-hmm.
been. We've always been at any place, any movement or anything group that existed. We've always been in them, but we've never been, or up until recently, I'll say, never been
Mm-hmm.
able to be the face of something. And I think
Right.
that's the part of it that's that's bittersweet to me, is that we're finally
Yeah.
able to be
Yeah.
the face of something, and
Well,
it's taken so long, and we ain't there yet. But
yeah. Well, to give you some context, the first international Mr. Leather was Ron Moore, 1984. And interestingly, my sister won International Miss Leather in 1997. And she was the second person of color. Jill Carter was the first in 96. And so, you start seeing uh, black faces in the international scene. Fast forward to now, in International Mr. Leather, the past two IMLs have been POCs, also men of Onyx. Um, Also at IMSO, there have been several consecutive women of color who have been winning and or who have held that title. And so there has been a lot more representation in the international title scene. And then also when you look at people who are representatives, like Vi Johnson, who's my leather mom, who runs the Carter Johnson Library.
mhm, oof,
And you're starting to see a lot of this stuff. On the other hand, you also see the problem that still exists. There's still not enough representation, and there's not a lot of people who feel comfortable with going to these events or these contests because of the concern about how they're going to be treated and valued.
yep. And that's why for me it was important to join, the local gay leather group,
Mm-hmm.
because
Yeah,
you can't make the changes from the outside. You gotta, if there's changes that need to be made, you gotta be at the table. And
you do.
so, like, to me, you are one of those people that inspire me to, to go and reach for those higher goals and those higher things that people can, that, because I would have never thought to compete for a leather title, like that's not a thing, you know but now I'm like, it's possible, it's something that I might can do at some point, you know um
You sure can.
so let's talk about the Coalition for Sexual Freedom. What is that?
The National Coalition for Sexual Freedom was founded circa 2001 by Susan Wright, and it's an advocate group for people who are living alternative sexual lifestyles. You so going what happened is going back prior to 2009, S&M was pretty much considered a paraphilia or a mental illness, okay? And just like in the early 1980s and prior, being gay was considered a mental illness.
Can't get a check
So,
for it though.
oh, well, it's not a mental illness now. But back then, I don't think people were getting checks. So here's the deal. So if something happened, then not only was it a mental illness, it's immoral and it's illegal because it's considered, simply put, assault, right?
Right.
And in some places, it's still considered assault, just like sodomy was until that landmark court case in Texas. So advocate groups were able to get certain things that shouldn't have ever been there in the first place, like being gay, out of what they call the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, which is a manual that psychologists use in order to identify if you have a mental illness. And they were able, the NCSF, along with other activists, were instrumental in that same thing, where they were able to advocate to get S&M out of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, in this case, the fifth edition, out, and say that, or to make sure that it was no longer a part of that whole diagnosis as having a mental illness. So they did that. They also were able to advocate and fight several major, one in particular, court case where they were able to protest the Communication Decency Act, which tried to censor a lot of not only S&M but adult websites. Something that you see kind of happening in a different place with the credit card companies that are not accepting adult sites, for
Right.
example, like with FedLife.
Yeah.
So
FedLife,
they,
OnlyFans, all of that stuff.
yeah, for OnlyFans is a really big one. Yeah. So back then, a lot of websites were being shut down by the federal government, or people were shutting their own websites down for fear of prosecution. The NCSF took this particular case to the Supreme Court and actually were pretty successful in defending it for the first time. The second time, not so much, but they were the first group that advocated for people who were part of alternative sexuality organization groups and communities to do that. So skip 5 years later, I was asked by a friend of mine who was the chair of the NCSF. She asked me if I wanted to be a part of it. And I said, I don't know. Then she said, you would be the first person of color to be a part of this. And I was like, you want me to be your token? And
That's always the first
she kind
question.
of she kind of finessed it. And I was like, I don't think so. And knowing several things and knowing that I really don't like to be a part of something just to be, I hate to say this, an Uncle Tom token or something. I don't think Uncle Tom is the right word, but I'll say token. I wasn't really excited about that idea. But at this particular point, I also wondered that, maybe the persons who come after me would have the opportunities to go on and do this and also be a part of something without having this label put on them. And that was a pretty tough decision that I made. And I did accept it. And I actually was able to do some pretty good work, and I did resign about a year later. But the people that came after me saw, and I would say people of color, some of of color that came after me were able, I don't want to say as a result of what I did, but I think because I was seen in that position, I think that helped to make them aware that this is something that wasn't only for white people.
Here's the thing
I
about tokenism.
I don't. Oh yeah,
Uh, you become the token so that others don't have to.
I guess the one thing I don't want to sound like, I really don't want to sound like, is it was because of me. I knew that, and I had this discussion with the person. I knew what I was getting into. I did accept. Afterwards, there were people after me who were people of color who were, and I'm not sure about now because I don't keep up with them, but fairly recently have been a part of this, and that particular thing was a non-issue.
You have, and I understand the not wanting to say it's because of you. That's that humbleness in you. Um, but you have to, think of it in terms of you made it easier. You made it possible. And that's the thing that I think one of what I love about this series that I'm doing is that everybody that I've talked to is so humble and they're like, well, I just did this thing and like don't stand up and talk your shit. You bust the door open and made it possible for other people to do the things that you did. It is because we didn't see it
Well,
before you.
I disagree. I don't think I made it possible. I think people were able to make decisions, or whatever the mechanisms or politics or however all of that stuff worked. I don't think the issue of anyone else after me, the issue of being a token, was a factor considering. But I can't say that for sure. I'm just speaking from my experience,
I hear
because
you.
somebody could come along and this will be a great thing for you. Somebody's going to call bullshit. And then you get a chance to break that news, and it'll be sexy because you have new information.
I just look at it from the standpoint of visibility is important. And a lot of times, we grow up in the society that says you can be anything and you can do whatever you want to do. But until people see you in positions or see someone that looks like them in positions, they don't really think they can do it. And you being, having so many first black things in the community may have made somebody who was like, I want to try this, but there's nobody that looks like me in it, made them go, well, if he did it, I can do it. you know if he's on the board, I can be on the board. If he's doing this, I can do that. And that's what I mean when I say, you know your humbleness won't let you talk that kind of shit and be like, yeah, I did it. I brought people behind me. And it's not necessarily saying that like you handpicked or you made it easy for them, because it's always going to be difficult no matter what situation you're in. We all deal with the isms, you know, as black identified people of color or people of color in general, or women or gay people in straight spaces, or straight people in queer spaces, and all of that. We all deal with that kind of stuff. But you made it possible because before you it wasn't possible.
I don't know if it wasn't possible. It could be, for me, when I unpack it, that uh, no one really wanted to. Or the board at that time, or maybe a few people who were part of the board at that time, we're looking for people of color to be a part of it. However, there's also the discussion of trying to bring somebody in a leadership role. And how would that look? How do you go about doing something like that? What are they going to be offended? Are they going to be upset? And I think what the thing that actually did it for me is I knew this person. We actually came up together in the community. We were young pups together, and if it was anybody else, I probably would have said no. But my relationship with this person for for such a long time was the thing, I think, that pushed it over. I knew this person, and I knew this person wasn't a racist.
You knew this person
So
had your best interest at heart.
I don't know. No, she had her best interest at heart. I know her that
You said, no, let's keep
well.
it real. She had her best interest
Yeah.
at heart. But she
So
wasn't going to put you
so
in a position.
yeah. And but like you said, you all have your problems, and so you if you're in that, if you're sitting at that table, then you're going to have to deal with all of the things that come with that, and that did happen.
Oh, I'm sure it wasn't easy. So, what we're gonna do right now, this is gonna be an extended interview, if you don't mind.
Okay,
We're gonna take a quick break, and we're gonna come back and talk about your rope stuff. How's that sound?
sounds good to me.
All right.